There are secrets hidden in the shadows of charm. And sometimes a man's most dangerous weapon isn't what you think. This is not just a story about seduction. It's a story about revenge, survival, and an ancient curse that no one saw coming. Stick around until the end to uncover the shocking twist that turned a predator into prey and a victim into a legend. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you don't miss stories like this. Real legends, reimagined with a modern twist. Long ago, in the serene, sun-soaked village of Achiora, nestled between the green hills and warm riverbanks of an unnamed land, life moved at a gentle rhythm. Farmers toiled during the day, children played under the shade of baobab trees, and the elders told stories beneath the stars. But peace is often just a mask, and under that mask darkness can fester. Everything changed the day Kaleb arrived. He wasn't born in Achiora. Nobody knew where he came from. But the moment he stepped into the village square, it was as if the air shifted. The women turned to look, not because of noise but because of presence. Kaleb was tall, with broad shoulders, caramel brown skin that gleamed in the sunlight, and eyes that seemed to undress every soul they met. He was soft-spoken, almost shy, and yet, he commanded attention like a king. The older men were wary, but the women? They were curious, enchanted even. One by one, Kaleb began weaving himself into the village's fabric. He helped with harvest. He danced at festivals. He even joined the singing choir at the local shrine. And still no one really knew him. But they didn't ask, because Kaleb was charming, and charm has a way of making people forget to question. It started subtly. Amara, a young weaver who lived with her grandmother, was the first to disappear. One morning her room was empty. The bedding was cold. Her loom untouched. The only sign that she had been there was a faint trail of dust leading toward the forest. 2 days later, her body was found lying near the river pail, lips blue, and 2 bizarre puncture wounds on her neck. The elders whispered, "Snake bite." But the healer shook his head. This was no ordinary snake. Weeks passed. Then Igioma, the baker's daughter, vanished. Then Zena, the drummer's sister. Always women. Always beautiful. Always last seen speaking to Kaleb. Still no one dared point a finger. How could they? Kaleb was always around. Helping. Mourning. Attending the burials with tears in his eyes. But there was something in those eyes. Something that didn't grieve. Then came Alina. She was not a native of Achiora. Her arrival was quiet, no fanfare, no greetings. She came with a heavy heart and a basket of herbs. Most assumed she was just another traveling healer. But Alina had a purpose, and a secret of her own. What the villagers didn't know was that Alina had lost someone too. Her best friend, Nimi, had died in another village weeks earlier. Nimi had written to her before she vanished, "There's someone. He's tall, soft-spoken, and makes me feel like the only woman in the world, but something about him feels ancient." When Nimi's body was found, it was already cold. 2 small, symmetrical wounds on her neck, identical to the others. Alina had followed the signs and they all led to Achiora. Kaleb noticed Alina the day she walked into the market. She was different. Her eyes didn't sparkle when she saw him. Her smile didn't stretch. She looked calculating. Kaleb was intrigued, and just like with the others, he moved in. He began small, helping her carry firewood, offering fresh mangoes, making quiet jokes as they crossed paths near the well. But Alina didn't bite. She watched, she waited, and she tested him. One evening, she walked alone near the old yam fields, knowing Kaleb would follow. He did. And as expected, he blocked her path, leaning casually against a tree. "Alina," he said, voice like honey, "you've been avoiding me." She smiled politely. "Have I? I've just been busy, surviving." Kaleb's smile faltered for a split second, but then he chuckled. "You're always so serious. Let me walk with you. Maybe I can change that." "No," Alina said flatly, stepping around him. "You can't." It was the first time anyone had told Kaleb no and walked away untouched, and it drove him mad. Let's pause for a moment. There's something deeply human and dangerously naive about how communities sometimes protect charm over truth. Kaleb was magnetic, yes, but people chose to overlook the warning signs. Why? Because it's easier to believe in beauty than to confront horror. We all do this. Whether in relationships, workplaces, or politics, we see red flags and call them passion, confidence, or eccentricity. But real wisdom is learning to trust what doesn't sparkle. Kaleb had never failed. He had always gotten what he wanted. And now, the one woman who didn't want him was the one he needed most. He changed tactics. He backed off, stopped chasing her, barely acknowledged her when they crossed paths. And it worked. Alina, of course, had expected this. She had read the pattern. She wasn't falling for Kaleb, she was drawing him in. Eventually, one quiet evening, she approached him herself. "You've been quiet," she said. Kaleb just nodded, sharpening his blade. "Want a walk?" she offered. He smiled faintly. "Sure." And so began the dance. Kaleb played his role flawlessly. Gone was the aggressive flirtation. Now he was gentle, patient, respectful. He told stories. He shared his loneliness. He made her laugh. Alina played along, pretending to lower her guard. One night, Kaleb invited her to his hut. "Just a quiet evening," he said. "We could share a drink, talk a little more." Alina agreed. Inside, the lamp flickered. Shadows danced on the walls. He poured palm wine. His voice softened. "I've been thinking about you, Alina," he said. "You're different, strong, unshakable. I like that." She smiled faintly, but inside she braced herself. Then came the question. "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" Her smile faded. He began to whistle. The tune was low at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder. The air thickened. The shadows moved. Then, from the folds of his robe, something began to stir. A shape, a hiss, a presence. Alina's eyes widened as a black serpent slithered forth, emerging from beneath Kaleb's clothes, alive, intelligent, and coiled with hunger. But she didn't scream. Instead, with one swift movement, she pulled something from her sash, a white flute etched with runes. Kaleb's smile twisted into confusion. She blew. The sound was sharp, piercing, ancient, and the snake stopped. Its eyes, once fixed on her, now wavered. Kaleb lunged, but it was too late. As the serpent froze mid-strike, Kaleb roared. Not like a man, but like something older, deeper. His eyes rolled back. His limbs stretched unnaturally. The room twisted, but Alina didn't flinch. She stepped back, holding the flute with both hands, and began to chant. The symbols on the flute glowed. The walls of the hut began to shimmer as if they were made of water. Kaleb tried to run, but his legs gave way. His body convulsed, crawling toward her like a beast possessed. "Who are you?" he hissed. And then she spoke. "I am the blood of Nemi. I am the daughter of Kanto. I am the seeker of truth. And I know what you are." Kaleb let out a howl, but this time the sound was not human. It was serpent-like, otherworldly. He collapsed. The snake coiled around his arm, confused, frightened. For the first time, Kaleb looked afraid. As Kaleb lay motionless, Alina reached into her pouch and pulled out a bone-carved token, placing it on his chest. The room dimmed and then flashed with visions. Flashes of the past. Flickering scenes of Kaleb not as a man but as a creature. Long ago he was not called Kaleb. He was Asalon, the favored son of the serpent god Zedu, a deity of seduction, decay, and temptation. Asalon had seduced countless women, feeding off their life force to sustain his own cursed immortality. Each time he made love, he stole years from his victims. His snake-like manhood was both literal and symbolic, a vessel of death disguised as pleasure. But there had been a rebellion. The goddess Lamara, protector of innocence, cursed him. "You will walk among humans with their face but not their soul. Your hunger will return every moon, and your form will twist with each conquest. The day a woman resists you completely, your curse shall unravel." Alina was that woman. Let's talk about that for a moment. Evil rarely shows up with fangs and claws. Most of the time it comes smiling, gentle, even romantic. Kaleb was evil wrapped in silk. But Alina? She was resistance wrapped in patience. Too often we tell people to avoid danger, but we don't teach them how to recognize manipulation when it comes dressed as love. This story reminds us, your intuition is sacred. Listen to it. But Kaleb didn't stay down for long. As Alina stood stunned by the vision, Kaleb snarled, then bit into his own arm, feeding the serpent with his blood. The snake surged with new life, growing larger, slithering across the room with unnatural speed. Alina turned to flee, but Kaleb slammed the door shut with force. "You think you've beaten me?" he growled, voice layered with hiss. "I've lived for centuries. I've drained queens and warriors. You're just a girl with a toy." But Alina smirked. "Then let's play." She raised her flute again, blowing another note, this time higher, sharper. The room cracked. The snake thrashed. Kaleb screamed. The sound was burning him from the inside. Alina took a piece of charcoal from her pouch and began drawing a ritual circle on the floor. She whispered words in the old tongue, words taught to her by her grandmother, the last known guardian of Lamara's temple. The circle ignited. Kaleb thrashed violently now, caught between his human and beast form. His skin shimmered, then peeled. Scales replaced flesh. His teeth grew longer. His spine bent backward. Alina stepped into the circle. "By Lamara's light, I bind the cursed child of Zedu. By blood unbroken, I cast you into shadow." Kaleb screamed, but the snake shrieked louder. It twisted, tangled in itself, and then it imploded into dust. Kaleb collapsed unconscious. Human again. When dawn broke, Alina stood before the village elders, dragging Kaleb's unconscious body. The villagers gasped. The women wept. And one by one they remembered. Touch by touch, kiss by kiss, Kaleb had fed on them all. He hadn't just seduced them. He had stolen from them. Some had aged prematurely. Others bore scars they couldn't explain. But now it all made sense. The truth was hideous, but necessary. Kaleb Asalon was imprisoned in a hollow tree deep in the forest, sealed by ancient runes only Alina could read. She left the key with the village matron. Should he ever awaken, Alina warned, this village must never forget what a monster looks like when it smiles. This isn't just myth. It's allegory. Kaleb represents every charming predator who hides behind sweet words and soft touches. Alina represents the survivor, the one who doesn't just escape but dismantles the system of fear and secrecy. In life, many face their own Kalebs, manipulators, abusers, deceivers. Some are romantic partners. Others are bosses, leaders, or even friends. But here's the truth. You're not weak for falling for charm, but you are powerful for waking up to it. Just when the village began to heal, a whisper spread. The hollow tree where Kaleb was sealed? It had cracked. The runes had dimmed. And near the forest's edge, a child claimed to see a figure in white, whistling the same haunting tune. A week after Kaleb's imprisonment, a boy named Toma wandered near the edge of the sacred woods. He claimed he heard whistling a tune almost identical to Alina's flute. Drawn by curiosity, he followed it. That's when he saw a woman in white robes standing beneath the hollow tree. But when Toma blinked, she was gone. The boy was rushed back to the village. The elders panicked. The tree was examined, and yes, the runes sealing Kaleb were fading. Worse still, he was no longer inside. At first, the villagers thought it was fear playing tricks, until a young man disappeared. Then a widow was found, aged overnight, her hair white, her eyes blank. The curse had returned, but Kaleb's body was nowhere to be found. Alina, who had remained in the village as its protector, consulted the ancient scrolls passed down from the temple of Lamara. What she discovered changed everything. According to legend, the curse of Zedu could only be temporarily sealed. To destroy it forever, the serpent source must be burned in holy fire, but that source wasn't Kaleb alone. The curse ran through blood, and Alina was not just a protector. She was a descendant. Her mother had hidden the truth. Her grandmother, the last true priestess of Lamara, had broken their lineage's vow to guard the prison and had fallen in love with one of Kaleb's kind. Alina was born from both bloodlines, the light of Lamara and the shadow of Zedu. Alina spiraled into doubt. Was that why she could resist Kaleb? Because part of her was like him? Was she a savior, or a sleeper waiting to awaken? The villagers, once worshipful, now kept their distance. One elder accused her, "Maybe you didn't come to save us. Maybe you came to finish what he started." But Alina didn't run. She stood tall. "Even if the serpent sleeps in me, I will be the one to end it." And so she made a decision. She would find Kaleb, not to imprison him but to destroy him. With only her flute, a dagger made of moonstone, and a vial of sacred oil, Alina journeyed into the blackened woods. 3 nights passed. On the 4th, under a blood moon, she found him. Or rather, he found her. Kaleb stood taller than before. Pale skin, slitted eyes, voice like velvet and thunder. His serpent was no longer separate, it had fused into him, one with his flesh. "Did you miss me?" he whispered. But Alina didn't respond with fear. She stepped forward. "Ready to end what your god began?" They clashed, flute and fong, light and shadow. Every note she played twisted the air around them, breaking reality. Kaleb struck with venom, his voice charming, his presence overwhelming. But she resisted. Every step she took, she whispered her lineage. "I am the final daughter of Lamara. The serpent ends with me." As they fought, Kaleb laughed. "You fool," he said. "You think killing me will stop this? I was only the first. There are others. Hundreds. Born through generations. The serpent lives in more than just me." And then he added coldly, "You carry it too. You can feel it, can't you? That darkness, that hunger. It's not just mine. It's yours." Alina faltered. The whispers in her head. The visions. The dreams of power. Could he be right? But then, a voice from within a memory of her grandmother calmed her. "Darkness may be your blood, but it is not your destiny." With one final breath, she stabbed the moonstone dagger into her own palm, letting her blood spill over the flute. It glowed white-hot. She played. The melody was no longer a song. It was a banishment. Kaleb howled. His body tore apart. The serpent writhed and screamed as holy light erupted from the flute. He fell to his knees. Scales burned. Fangs melted. "You are not stronger than me," he gasped. Alina whispered, "I am not stronger. I am freer." And with one final note, Kaleb exploded into ash. The trees stopped swaying. The wind calmed. The woods were finally still. This story is not just about monsters. It's about inheritance, choice, and healing. Kaleb thought power meant control, that seduction meant ownership, that his curse made him eternal. But Alina taught us this. We are not defined by what we inherit but by what we choose to end. It's easy to repeat the cycles of pain, to pass down trauma, to let darkness fester. But the hardest thing, the bravest thing, is to say, "This ends with me." Whether it's generational hurt, toxic relationships, or silent suffering, we always have the power to stop it. If you've ever battled inner demons or walked away from someone who tried to dim your light, this story is yours. Comment below. What would you have done in Alina's place? Would you choose to run or to fight your own blood? Share your thoughts. We read every comment. Like this video if Alina's journey inspired you. Subscribe for more legends reimagined. And remember, the greatest stories are the ones we live through. Thank you for watching. None of them knew his manhood was a snake. A tale of seduction, survival, and self-liberation.